Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Today is Thursday, February 15th, 2024. We have 7 bills on the docket, and we're going to start off with Senator McCray with Senate Bill 468. Senator, you can bring up your panel if you like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Corey McCray, Senator for the 45th Legislative District. And Mr. Chair, I think that I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm happy to be joined by my shadow today, Ms. Maya Woods. If y'all can give if you can stand up, Maya. Thankful for the leadership of Delegate Janelle Wilkins, our Madam Chair, but just expressly glad and gratitude, just making sure that the exposure is taking place. And I'm sure that you said it on the Senate floor. Mr. Chair, I'm here in reference to Senate Bill 468. Senate Bill 468 is not something that you're hearing for the first time. It deals with our home monitoring systems and making sure that when we're dealing with these long extended days, that the notification is taking place with our respective agencies from that standpoint. Mr. J, I'm not going to belabor because you've already heard the bill. I hope that the House moved it last time. Senate was a little bit slow getting there, and hoping that we can move this in the posture that it's supposed to be moved in. I'm joined by my mayor. I don't know why the councilman is sitting back there, but I'm joined by the councilman from the 7th District. Both here to express why the concern exists, but more importantly, why we should pass this bill. Hoping that the Senate JPR will move in the right direction and pass Senate Bill 468. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As you know, I'm Mayor Brandon Scott, Mayor of the City of Baltimore, and here to testify in support of Senate Bill 468, which you know seeks to address issues around home detention that an individual on home monitoring can go missing. The timing. We know we talked about this bill a lot. Last year, we were blessed to have the support of the House. We're hoping to have that in the Senate. As you know, under current law, when someone leaves their home and are under home monitoring, the company that monitors that individual in private detention has an initial 24-hour period in addition to a full business day before they are required to notify the appropriate authority. Quite frankly, that is unacceptable in the year of our Lord 2024. We continuously have people die or become the perpetrators of violence with home monitoring bracelets on them. I myself have been to scene after scene after scene and see one of these bracelets. We had a mass shooting in Baltimore with someone that was on home monitoring. Continuously, we are seeing these things. We had a young man who was the first victim of a homicide in the city of Baltimore this year that was on home monitoring. We have to address this issue because while we had a historic reduction in homicides last year in the city of Baltimore, we know that we can take that work even further, but making sure that every single part of the public safety ecosystem is working in conjunction and working in 2024 terms and technology is something that we must do. Because when I hear from Baltimoreans and Marylanders all around the state, when they see me talking about this issue, is that they simply cannot believe that right now that this isn't an instant notification, that we don't always know exactly where these people are, and they're expecting all of us to work together to make this issue something that we're addressing. And Mr. Chair, I want to thank you for your bill that you introduced as well. I think working together around these bills and around this issue is something that we all can come together to do to keep people in our state and our city healthy, safe, and alive. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Councilman James Torrance of the 7th Council District. I represent Central West Baltimore. Many of the persons who are returning home to Baltimore City from incarceration return to my district, nearly over 60% of them. I, as the mayor mentioned, represented a young man who was our first victim of homicide this year. He also attended my alma mater, Carverville Tech. Had we gotten the proper notice that he was out and about at 2 a.m., we would have had a law enforcement person intervene to actually save his life. That is how much of important of a notification that we need. I've also been to scenes where persons who've had electronic monitoring have committed acts of violence in my district. I've also seen when young people have gone missing and we've gotten a notification days later and potentially been connected to trafficking or carjackings or theft of vehicles. These are opportunities for us to provide ample notification, not only to law enforcement, but those caring adults who also can bring them back home and also make sure that they stay safe. But in addition to that, that allows my neighbors to know every day that they wake up that there is a watchful eye for persons that are paying to be monitored by the state of Maryland. I just want to say it again, people are paying to be monitored. This is a revenue source. We might as well use it correctly and make sure that all our law enforcement agencies, as well as those human service agencies, can get to the persons to make sure they make the right choices, that they be able to be gone through the entire ecosystem of the criminal justice system, but make sure that our communities remain safe. With that, I urge your support.
Thank you all very much. Questions from the committee? Senator James and Senator West.
Thank you for bringing this bill again, and I do recall it. There's two things I was going to ask about, and one you might want to follow up with as opposed to address here. But I do note that the Maryland Judiciary has a memorandum saying they do support the bill, but with amendments. And interestingly, they say the judiciary has been working with Baltimore City on these amendments, and we understand that sponsors are amenable to them. So we have their amendment in front of us, and I do want to hear just briefly your response to their amendments.
No, the judiciary is absolutely right. We've been working with them, and I believe that my staff is going to get them to committee council. They've already, I believe,
then
been directed.
If this can be answered quickly, let's do it. But if not, just follow up with me, because I'm with the mayor that I assume that when you're on this kind of electronic monitoring, that there is a group of people, I don't know if it's the private sector or government, that are constantly monitoring. The whole point of this is that you can monitor from afar, and that if you're not where you need to be, the technology is there, that those that have put the monitoring system on and are charged with monitoring these people know immediately that someone is not complying with whatever the strictures are on that person. So I'm a little lost with this, that if they know immediately, wouldn't they just call law enforcement? And I'm sure I'm wrong, because there's obviously a problem. So what happens? I assume the monitoring people know immediately, but the law is that they then have to go to court first? Is that the issue?
So let me be clear, like Senator James, I'm gonna let my mayor get up here and speak, but like you're saying what logical people was thinking too. So that's how I would think that the process would work. So keep in mind, let's say that we have a holiday, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and that notification or that coordination is not happening with the agency. That's the reason for the bill. So how you think that the process is supposed to work is how we think that the process is supposed to work.
But I'm so surprised, since
like
this requires 24-hour vigilance. I'm surprised that in its initial setup, if you're in the House of Corrections, people don't go, oh, it's a holiday, we're not going to be monitoring the people in prison. So it would seem to me, since this is a way to keep people, back out on the streets pending certain things, or, it could be probation, that I'm very surprised that, is it a state law that lets it not be 24/7, 7 days a week, 365
I think
days?
there's a gray area because we haven't leaned in and said how it's supposed to be. So that's the reason why the bill. So I'm frustrated, but I'm not surprised, because sometimes government just don't operate the way it's supposed to, because the government is partnering with the private sector. The private sector isn't coordinating with government, who is giving them the money. As the councilman stated, these are taxpayer dollars that they're receiving, and it's not working in the efficient manner that it's supposed to, the way me and you think that it's supposed to work. I'll let my man speak.
Just want to say, I think it's doubtless that the technology exists for instant notification.
Say that again.
It's doubtless that the technology exists for that instant notification process to happen. The statute, the way it's written, is that if the person's missing for more than 24 hours, they have to notify by the next business day, which means you could be gone for 48 hours.
Right.
And so that's the That's what we're trying to do here. So,
Okay.
I think it's
I don't want to
doubtless,
make the hearing longer. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
didn't realize that, I think I just had the common understanding of the ordinary
Yeah,
man or woman
that's
that
right.
this would all be instantaneous. And we-
Yeah, I think we
right?
all have that
Okay, good.
expectation
Yeah.
sitting in the, yeah. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Senator, you're spot on. I think that's the reality. We all thought that, right? I thought that, and I'll just walk you through, because for me, this isn't about going out and locking up a bunch of people. This is about actually giving these folks who we're putting on home monitoring the ability to be rehabilitated. But we can't do that if they're dead, right? We came to this issue, I called my senator after an incident where a young man was killed, and I was there and I saw an ankle bracelet, and I said, well, call. So they called and said, oh, did you guys say that a carjacking happened 30 minutes before this? They're like, oh yeah, he was right at that location. I'm like, don't tell me he did that before. Why didn't you tell me that he was missing right beforehand? Because they don't have to. They're not required to. They're only going to do what they're required to do. And we're working with the judiciary, because even if they did, right, even if you were standing outside, you wanted to go to the Ravens game with a home monitoring bracelet on, and a police officer saw you right now, they still couldn't do anything to you without first going back to the agency and that private person going to the judiciary and getting a warrant. Think about how many acts of violence or whatever can happen to you or by you in that time. And that's why the senator's here. That's why we're here, because we cannot allow this to continue to happen across the state of Maryland.
Yes, I agree with you. And we might have to do even more than this bill, but we'll deal with this bill now because that's what's
Fine by
important,
me.
right? Yeah, I'm not gonna hijack your bill to make perfection, but you bring up a larger issue as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Mayor. Senator, could I ask you a question? So this past fall, twice in windstorms, trees went down near our house and the electricity went off. We have a home monitoring system, and almost immediately we got a telephone call from the agency saying the power is off. Has something happened in your house? So my question is, why are we saying in the bill that, why are we giving the initial 24 hours for the monitoring for the person to be missing? Wouldn't the monitoring company, if they're any good, know almost immediately once they've left the house that they're no longer where they're supposed to be? Why should we have even 24 hours delay?
So keep in mind that was the posture that it started in last year. You all didn't move it. So like, this is a negotiation. This is us trying to figure out where is the middle with these respective agencies. But the posture that the bill did start in immediate notification.
Okay. I understand that, but we could always change the bill. Would there be a problem?
The challenge is that you have the judiciary, you got a number of folks that's engaged and involved that got to a sweet spot of what the posture that they would be amenable to, acceptable to.
So this has been negotiated.
This has been worked through with a number of different parties that have an interest in it.
All right. Well, this is better than what we've got right now. So I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator, for bringing in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the council member as well. Look, the status quo of this is unacceptable, and this entire system is a complete mess. I mean, from where the Department of Corrections, if you don't know, is responsible for kind of licensing this process and also oversight, and they're also responsible for auditing their own processes. So that's interesting. Then you've got the courts involved, and then you've got these 5 companies that provide this service that, frankly, we have not held them to a high enough standard within the law or how we regulate and provide oversight. And it's having real public safety consequences. So the problem is much bigger than just this bill. This bill will help, but we've got, that's why that other bill, is important. It's going to create a work group to kind of assess this and figure out how we can make more broader systemic change. And I see Senator Alfreth is back there too. She's worked on this issue a lot, and obviously the council member and the mayor and Senator McCray, you've led this effort here in the assembly. So we'll work with you. We'll be in touch on this. We're going to get it right. So I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, I just hope that we can move it this year because it got stuck last year.
I hear you.
I appreciate you.
No, we hear you loud and clear.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure. All right, with that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 468. We'll now move on to Senator Alfreth, Senate Bill 439.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May my panel join? Okay. And before I get started, that was a really good bill, and I want to thank the chair and Senator McCray. We're actually have DPSCS upstairs for their budget hearing, and I'm sure this very issue will come up again because it's something we're watching very closely in the budget to make sure that the state's public safety powers are being utilized properly by private companies. So with that, Mr. Chair, Senate Bill 439, the Domestic Violence Program Grant Fund, in short, it's simply going to establish a Victim of Domestic Violence Program Grant Fund. It is going to allow the governor to, he may allocate up to $5 million a year. Again, representing Budget and Taxation Committee, it is a may, not a shall. And then ensuring that the programs that could take advantage of this fund for victim services would be federally certified to qualify. So we're talking about the best of the best programs here. This is an issue I know this committee hears quite a bit about. You've heard, particularly since the pandemic, we've seen an uptick in domestic violence, sexual assault cases, and we as a state simply need to do more. The legislature took a great step forward just a few years ago in consistently funding VOCA, but there's still more to do, and this is a piece of the more to do. We know that domestic violence programs save lives. They provide protection from abusers through emergency housing. They support the rebuilding of lives through counseling and advocacy and education. Services survivors receive are unique to each circumstance because every case is going to be different. And the programs that we have here in Maryland are well suited to provide that specific support. Again, incidents of domestic violence has gone up. In 2021, there were 762 domestic survivors were served in just one day in Maryland. That was a high in 2021. I'm very saddened to share with you in 2022, that high for just one day was 1,009. So that's the uptick in just that 1 year. When we don't have consistent state funding for these programs, it's hard for them to retain staff. And you're going to hear from a number of the programs today about the high need and high cost of retaining high quality staff, because we're talking about therapists, we're talking about social workers, we're talking about people who are helping others through the worst moments of their lives. It takes a great toll, and we want to make sure we're compensating them competitively and well for that work. But it's hard for programs to retain staff when they're budgeting on a year-by-year basis without the consistent support that they require from the state. So consistent services just simply require consistent state funding. This is going to put the domestic violence programs on the same parity as our sexual assault programs, and again, allow the governor to fund up to $5 million for this work. So with that, Mr. Chair, you're going to hear a lot from the programs today about the importance of their work and the importance of consistent funding, and I respectfully request a favorable committee report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Melanie Shapiro, Public Policy Director with the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, here in support of Senate Bill 439. I talk a lot about the 19 comprehensive programs. These are the comprehensive programs we're talking about. Many of them are here represented today, and every single one of them has signed on to testimony that I filed to support this piece of legislation. Sitting up here today waiting to testify, these are the people on the other end of the phone when a victim calls at 3 a.m. These are the people that open the door to the shelter when a victim decides they're ready to leave. And these are the people who went to work and kept shelters open throughout the pandemic when most of us were working from home. It's time that we demonstrate to them our commitment to ending domestic violence in Maryland. These programs are required by law to provide emergency housing, counseling services, referrals to other programs, operate 24-hour hotlines, and abuser intervention programs. That's in Family Law 4515, as well as COMAR. These same programs employ staff that can make the same, if not more money, working at Starbucks or McDonald's, many of whom have made it their life's work to help those escaping violence. One, if not the single largest expense that these programs face is the emergency housing that they offer. There is at least one program in every county in Baltimore City, but the housing is critical. That's what's life-saving. It's consistently identified as a primary need for victims of domestic violence, as well as a cause of homelessness. A victim cannot leave if they have nowhere safe to go. These programs offer that safe place. They are available at 2 in the afternoon. They're available at 2 in the morning. The bill will establish the Victims of Domestic Violence Grant Fund and enable the governor to include in the annual budget an appropriation of $5 million to the fund. This is all that has ever been allocated by the state is approximately $2 million, a little bit over, as far back as I can see, at least 10 years. And as you've already heard, The number of victims have increased, the complexity of the violence has increased, and the cost of operating a program has increased as well. The bill would also require MNADV to certify the programs as comprehensive. I'd like to thank Senator Elfreth for her leadership on this issue and urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 439.
I'm here to speak as a survivor of domestic violence. My name is Fawn Vasquez. I was a victim of a decade of abuse at the hands of my ex-husband. I'm an abuser when I was very young. He was friends with mutual friends and we grew up in a small town together. I met him again as a teenager and he seemed like somebody I already knew because of childhood history, but it would turn out that I truly knew nothing about him or what he was capable of. Not long after our relationship started, I found out I was pregnant. I was scared. I had had a traumatic childhood and was living in squalor with a drug-addicted mother. When he promised me we could be a family and told me he wanted me to come and live with him, I agreed. Getting out of my situation was a priority for me and my unborn child. I had no idea what was in store for me. A few months into the pregnancy was the first time he assaulted me. He wrapped his hands around my throat until I stopped fighting and went silent. He did this because I was crying. He did not want me to wake up his father. I was in such shock, I couldn't believe what had happened, but I believed him when he told me that I was acting hysterical and hormonal from my pregnancy and that, of course, he would never do it again. But he did. Every day after that was some level of abuse. I suffered financial, physical, verbal, and sexual abuse. I did everything I could to be good enough to make it stop, but the cycle of violence makes it so easy for victims to become trapped. Over the years, I would have 2 more children with him. With each, the violence would escalate, even resulting in police arrests and charges. But he never stopped, and I was never told there was help. One day in May of 2015, a terrible verbal assault occurred, and I was left sobbing on the floor next to our children, crying out, "Someone please help us." He became so enraged that I had called for help that he picked me up by my hair and arms, held me like a battering ram, and slammed me through a glass door. It's some miracle the glass did not shatter, but the door latch broke instead. I landed outside on concrete, knocked unconscious for an unknown period of time. When I came to, I realized I had been locked out of the home, and fearing a hostage situation, I pleaded my way back in to protect my children. I remember me telling him, "One of these days you're going to kill me." And he looked me in the eye and said, "I know I will." 3 days later, he finally left the house. It was then that I realized how affected my whole family had been. That day, my child grabbed a laundry basket to block the door. I asked what they were doing, and I was told, "I have to build a wall so daddy can't come inside and hurt you anymore." It was that day and that moment that changed something inside of me, and I realized that all those years of abuse was not just happening to me alone. My babies were deeply impacted and were affected. And once I realized this, I knew I had to end things. All the love I had or could ever give would never be enough to stop the monster inside. So I called the domestic violence hotline. They immediately got me in contact with resources, the most important being Midshore Council on Family Violence. From that day, my life began to change, or maybe that was the day it began. The resources I was provided were more than life-changing. I found out I was pregnant after receiving a protection order with my 4th child. A single mom, 4 kids, 9 months pregnant, and I was placed in a transitional housing program. It may not sound ideal to be a single mom with 4 kids, but for us, it was the greatest time of our lives. It was the first time freedom, it was the first time safety, and first time had we ever had hope for our futures. I'm here to tell you that I am not just a statistic. My name is Fawn and I am a survivor. My precious children, Hal, May, Theo, and Charlie, they are survivors. I would not be here to tell my story today if it weren't for the help and resources that are provided from Maryland's domestic violence programs and Midshore Council on Family Violence. I urge a favorable report today so that my success story can be one of many for future survivors. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Jean Yeager. I am the Executive Director of the Midshore Council on Family Violence, the program that assisted Fawn. We provide services in Kent, Caroline, Queen Anne's, Dorchester, and Talbot County, located on the eastern shore of Maryland. What you've heard today about the work of our domestic violence programs is a sum total of all the essential work we do. We are the central point of contact for not only survivors of domestic violence, but also community partners. We are the agency that receives the calls from law enforcement when they respond to a domestic violence call, or from the hospital when they are working with a victim of domestic violence in the hospital. We are that resource in that jurisdiction and in that county that is available 24/7, 365 days of the year to not just victims, but to those who respond to victims. I think that's a really important point to share. You've heard, we've all complied with the COMAR regulations, but I think what's really essential about our programs in each county is we modify, we enhance, we provide services that are relatable to the communities in which we work. And I'll give you an example, like on the Eastern Shore, there is no transportation system for clients to get to us. So we have a transportation coordinator and 3 donated vans. We do a very comprehensive pet sheltering program because pets are part of the culture in the rural communities, and many victims can't or won't leave because of pets. All of us change our services to meet the needs of Spanish-speaking victims or immigrant victims. We know the communities in which we operate, and we're able to provide those very unique services. I think the point has been made that we need reliable and stable funding. One of the challenges we face is that we have funding sources, but they may cut funding one year. We go year to year. We don't know whether we can't make a 2-year budget for the most part. We have to go year to year, and that affects staff, that affects funding. So thank you very much.
Members of the committee, my name is Luisa Chiazzo, and I have been the CEO of the Sexual Assault Spouse Abuse Resource Center in Hartford County for 18 years. This bill will establish a certification process for programs in the domestic violence field to ensure that vulnerable individuals receive the same quality services regardless of the program that they access. This includes that employees have regular oversight, training, and that programs are providing best practices in the interventions. As a dual program providing both domestic and sexual violence support, we already participate in the similar certification process for rape crisis centers in Maryland. Shelter staff are trained, and they do intervene in suicide attempts, drug overdose, and mental and physical health needs of both parents and children. The entire agency must react to monthly safety alerts when a perpetrator's vehicle is spotted around our property. For example, one abuser continued to call and hang up via the 24-hour helpline for over an hour, proudly stating that no one else would be able to get help during that time. So our team members are really dealing with some pretty horrible stuff and really standing up to protect people who are coming in for services. Our programs are the only avenue for victims that are fleeing these very threatening circumstances. Our shelter team members are earning $18 an hour. They can go also to Walgreens in Bel Air, which pays $17.50, or Burger King, which pays $18 an hour with benefits. Well-meaning community members call SARC wanting to establish programs without fully understanding what is involved. There's a lot of safety things that we really need to take into account. So not establishing a certification will place domestic violence victims at risk as they desperately seek assistance. So I urge you to favorably report on this bill. Thank you.
Well, Senator, thank you for bringing the bill forward, and thank you for the panelists for all the work you do in the community. And for Fawn, thank you for your courage in coming here today. It's always, I think, very important to the process to have people with lived experiences come before a legislative body like this to affect change. And so really do appreciate your courage and your presence here today.
Thank you.
Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Senator Elfreth, for bringing this really, really important bill. I just have a question for you. I do absolutely trust the wisdom of this policy committee to understand the importance of investing in these programs. From a budget committee perspective, can you just explain to us why it's important to have a special fund and why having that point at $5 million, even with the shall, has meaning, and we should move forward with that?
Sure.
And maybe go to the podium so that they can see you in the.
Yes.
I know, that's how we roll here in
I know,
JPR.
I'm still getting used to it too. The importance, because we've moved to question 1 in the budget process. This is a very strong recommendation to the governor. We hope he fulfills the $5 million suggestion the General Assembly is giving him. Putting it in a special fund just ensures that it can't be moved around as easily when we have tough budget years. And again, it's more of a dedicated purpose than a large pot of money. Now, there are other pots of money that come, as I mentioned, VOCA before, but I think it's incredibly important, again, for the stability of these programs to have greater consistency across budget years.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Further questions from the committee? All right, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you.
Some of the panelists had to leave because their crosswalk got called, so that's why they left early, just for the members. All right, so is Miss Lori Ruth, you want to still testify? Yep, Miss Ruth, come on up. Gwinnetta McCraw. Yep. And Miss Jordan and Miss Rodriguez went to the cross aisle, so they're across the street. Have I missed anyone that wants to testify in favor of this bill?
I'm sorry.
I was just wondering if I missed anyone that wants to testify. I think we're good. All right. Go
Good
ahead.
afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Laurie Ruth. I'm the Chief Programs Officer at the Women's Law Center in Maryland. As the chair said, they just called the bill across the street, so everybody raced over there. I'm here as a non-comprehensive program to support this bill. The Women's Law Center provides legal services. We don't have a hotline, we don't have a shelter, we don't have therapists, and we rely very, very heavily on the comprehensive programs in the various counties in which we work. If Ms. Rodriguez was still here, she's the executive director of Turnaround, which is Baltimore City and Baltimore County. We rely on the House of Ruth in Baltimore City. We rely on Springboard in Carroll County. We have a very close relationship with them. And I cannot tell you how vital their services are. We are very integrally involved with them often and have common clients often, and it is a way to provide holistic services to these victims and survivors who really need assistance with all the wide array of things that Ms. Shapiro mentioned. So I just wanted to emphasize that although this money wouldn't be coming to us, we still support it fully and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and community members. Hi. Excuse me, my name is Gwen McCraw, and I am the Director of Community Crisis Program. We are the only domestic violence shelter in Prince George's County. Our shelter is 24 hours. We have a 24-hour hotline. We have a chat that operates from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. We actually started that during COVID, so more people could reach out to us. So at the shelter, the services that we provide, of course, is shelter. We provide case management. We provide DV counseling to the survivors there. We partner with legal services as well. And we also provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We also provide, and our approach is trauma informed. We also provide support to our youth as well that reside in the safe house. I have a staff that assist them with making sure that they in school, stay on top of school, and any support that they need with their educational needs. And we not only provide services to the survivors that come to the safe house, because not everyone wants to come to the safe house. So we also provide service to victims of domestic violence within the community as well. Just alone in 2023 calendar year, we provided services in the safe house to 225 households, which consists 219 women, 229 children, and 6 men.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Amanda Rodriguez. I am the Executive Director of Turnaround, which is the comprehensive domestic violence provider in Baltimore County. We also serve domestic violence survivors in Baltimore City. During COVID, our lethality assessment numbers rose by thousands of %, meaning that more clients than ever were experiencing extreme levels of violence and were at risk of harm. Our team had to grow to be responsive to the growing need in our community, and we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars for safe shelter for families fleeing violence. Unfortunately, the numbers have not decreased, although they have stabilized over the last year. Sorry, I had to run to the house. Let me take a breath. We did, well, not for the hearing, but we made it to the House. During the same period of time, just like everyone else, we were experiencing staffing shortages and our salaries simply could not compete with the market. Our staff serve some of the most vulnerable in our community. They showed up in the office when the world was shut down, so children who witnessed domestic violence in their homes could get desperately needed trauma therapy. They showed up to cover shifts at shelters or to provide emergency support in spite of the risk of the pandemic. Our staffs are some of the most dedicated people in our community, and the inability for them to have a competitive wage is simply unconscionable. We also need to ensure that we can hire when our community need has not diminished. All of us comprehensive domestic violence providers serve our constituents for free, but it begs the question, what is the cost of being free? Is there enough to support the mother of 5 who's been forced not to work by an abusive husband to get a place of long-term stability? Is there enough for a strangled young man who will need ongoing therapy for years to cope with the trauma that he experienced? Or the teenager raped by her ex-boyfriend who will now have to go through a lengthy criminal and Title IX process? Who should we say we are sorry, but we're unable to serve because we simply we no longer have capacity? There is a cost for being free, and we ask for the support of every survivor, the third of us that will experience this type of violence in our lifetime. So they will have a comprehensive domestic violence center to access when the unspeakable happens. We're asking for a favorable report. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lisa Jordan at the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. We're also here in support of our sister coalition, the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence, and Senate Bill 439. I'm really just here to say me too, and to also say that MCASA already certifies the rape crisis centers. So this is a process that works. We certify some of their funding is based on that. We help make sure that the services offered are high quality, trauma informed, and effective. So I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about our process at MCASA and encourage you to set up the same process for the Network Against Domestic Violence and our domestic violence programs. For those reasons, we request a favorable report on Senate Bill 439, and we made it to your hearing, but not across the street, I'm sad to say.
Well, the Senate's where the action is anyway, so.
It's very important.
There you go. All right, questions from the committee? All right, I think we are cross-assigned with the budget and tax on this. Just look at is that right? So we have to take action before you all can? Okay. All right, we'll get on it. Further questions? All right, thank you all very much. Senator Brooks is here. Senator, that'll conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 439. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 450 with Senator Brooks. Welcome.
Thanks, Chair. And Chair Smith, Vice Chair Waldstrike, and members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on behalf of SB 450. For the record, I'm Senator Ben Brooks, representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. This bill is a monitoring bill, and the purpose of the bill is to localize decisions making for installing new speed monitoring systems. According to Maryland law, speed monitoring systems record images of vehicles traveling 12 miles per hour over the speed limit. These systems have been proven to improve safety on our roads. A 7.5-year-long study was conducted in Montgomery County, where speed cameras were associated with a 62% reduction in the likelihood that a vehicle was traveling more than 10 miles per hour above the speed limit. Moreover, there were about 39% reduction in the likelihood that a crash resulting from an incapacitating or fatal injury near the camera site. Speed monitoring systems are an indispensable tool for keeping the community safe. State law currently allows local authorities the unilaterally to install new systems within a half-mile radius of a school zone. However, with the current law, Baltimore County does not have the purview for the placement of speed monitoring devices outside of the school zone. Instead, they must bring that before the state legislature. This leaves a huge gap in Baltimore County's residential neighborhoods that are not near a school zone, but are still having issues with unsafe speeding on their roads. SB 450 enables Baltimore County to join other counties in making decisions that directly impact the safety of their constituents. Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Arundel County all have local authority in determining the speed monitoring placements. Speeding in residential neighborhood is dangerous and places safety of other vehicles, personal property, and above all, pedestrians at risk. Slowing down to a safe speed should not be a controversial thing when lives and well-being and others are at stake. SB 450 ensures that these systems are not being arbitrarily installed throughout the neighborhoods. Installation of a camera requires a traffic study, public input, police involvement, and approval by the county council. Speeding is a local public safety issue and should be handled locally. SB 450 empowers local officials in Baltimore County to make an informed decision about speeding and improving the safety of their communities and the responsiveness of local government. And for that reason, I ask for a favorable report.
Yes, Senator Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hey, Senator, thanks for bringing the bill. I just have a couple questions. You brought up about the 7.5-year study that had a 62% reduction. Did that study happen to mention in those how much revenues were generated from those cameras, that same study, over that same period of time?
I can circle back with you on that information, yes.
Okay. And then I do want to point out, because this is something that I just learned recently, is that the requirement of a traffic study, like I think that's a necessary component, right?
Right.
But are you aware that the results of said study are irrelevant? Like it can show there's no speeding there on a continuous basis and they can still put it there?
Okay, yeah, well, there has been at least 4 studies done by Baltimore County in certain areas where they would potentially put these cameras.
Right.
And they showing the results and then the number of crashes that were there. You know.
Yeah, I'm just making you aware. Were you aware that the results are irrelevant to being, all you have to do is say that you did a study or do a study and the results have no impact. If the results are not showing a continuous pattern, were you aware that you can still put a camera there just because you did a study?
I would, because of the cost of those cameras, I would think that you would put it there to perhaps mitigate the speeding concern.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I appreciate it.
Yes.
I just wanted to make you aware because I just learned this year myself, and I found it completely insulting that we're required to have a study, which is supposedly to provide results, but regardless of the results, that because it doesn't say in language in in legislation that the results should, provide justification, doesn't matter. They can do it as long as they've done the study.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Are you offering an amendment? I'm just kidding. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, does this have anything to do with paint?
Not at all, Senator.
My questions have been answered. Thank you. Thank you.
We see Senator Hershey just came in here too. I'm gonna ask him about some condo solar action too. All right, Senator West.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking at this bill, and this bill is written into a much larger bill that covers the whole state. But a number of counties, but the section that in this particular bill that only covers Baltimore County, as I read it, in response to Senator Fulton, says the Baltimore County Police Department, in order to do it, they can't put it on a Baltimore County highway unless, number one, the Baltimore County Police Department determines that the speed monitoring system is necessary based on a traffic study safety analysis for the proposed location. So in other parts, this word necessary is not in the statute, but in this particular bill, in Baltimore County only, it will have to be determined to be necessary in order to put the speed camera system. Don't you agree to that?
I certainly do.
Thank you.
Yes.
So would you be amenable to making a friendly amendment that we go ahead and make it for all jurisdictions? That would be the recommendations off this.
That's your bill for next year.
It's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, man.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, do you have a delegation letter?
We're going to be voting on this on Monday, and I'll make sure we get that for you. Cool, Chair.
All right. Further questions? The cameras always engender a lot of debate in this committee for some reason.
Yes, yeah. But Chair, this one too, it would only be in communities, and then where the speed limit is between 20 and 35 miles an hour. And in order to get your picture taken by the camera, you would have to be going 12 miles beyond the posted speed limit. So, and there are several communities that have requested this. And, and it's a safety issue. So, and we don't think anyone should be driving like that within communities because of the possibility or the probability of injuring kids who don't always look when they cross the street. And its study shows that if you're driving beyond 35 miles an hour, the likelihood of there being a serious or life-threatening injury goes up to about 70%, as opposed to 30% or less if you're going under that speed limit. So, yeah. All
right. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right, that will conclude the hearing for Senate Bill 450. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 464.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello. Members of the committee. For the record, Senator Michael Jackson representing District 27 on behalf of Senate Bill 464. Senate Bill 464 is a piece of legislation that came to me through our working relationship with the Department of Transportation and is a piece of the State Highway Administration's Vision Zero initiative, which holds the noble aim of eliminating pedestrian, traffic, or highway fatalities. And just by way of background, Mr. Chairman, when I worked in leadership development for public safety on the early part, I think around 2011 through 2014, I got to meet the then director of the Maryland Highway Safety Office, Tom Gianni. And so this agency has been working very diligently to put tools in their toolbox to walk down our fatalities. The bill is fairly straightforward. It simply authorizes the State Highway Administration to reduce the speed limit on an urban highway by up to 5 miles per hour without a traffic or engineering study. I heard that a little earlier. The bill applies to state-owned and maintained highways that do not restrict non-motorized access located in incorporated municipalities or locations within the U.S. Census Bureau designated urban areas. Where pedestrian generators are present adjacent to the corridor. Present studies have shown, and unfortunately, we continue to see a number of fatalities or serious injury accidents. And so we are working in conjunction with the Department of Transportation to help them with tools. They need to come to us to ask for this help. And we're more than happy to be their partner in this. So with that, we'd ask for a favorable report. I will stand with 4 questions along with my Department of Transportation partners. And I think we'll be speaking here in a second. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith, Vice Chair Wallstreicher, and members of the committee. I'm Candice Holford, Director of Active Transportation and Micromobility at MDOT, the Secretary's Office. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 464 and Senator Jackson for your sponsorship. Slower traffic creates a safer environment for everyone. Last year, I got to experience what it was like to be hit by a speeding and intoxicated driver. I was hit so hard that the G-force dialed 911 on my iPhone instantly. Luckily, I was in my car, not on foot, and I was okay. My car was totaled, but I was okay. A pedestrian struck at 25 miles per hour has a 25% risk of serious injury or death. The risk jumps to 50% at 33 miles per hour and 75% at 41 miles per hour. This bill authorizes State Highway to expedite incremental changes to posted speed limits more quickly and at minimal costs. Under current law, any changes require several months and several $1,000s. So jurisdictions have taken it upon themselves to change the law, as we're hearing. This bill is an opportunity to directly impact the efficacy of speed management on state highways with one action. According to NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, small changes in average speed can yield significant changes in crash and injury outcomes. If a lower speed limit yields reduced operating speeds and crashes, injuries are expected to decrease. These outcomes are more likely with complementary countermeasures in engineering and enforcement. In summary, appropriate speed limits result in crash reductions, and experts recommend incremental changes to speed limits to progressively decelerate the flow of traffic. This bill authorizes SHA to expedite small but impactful safety strategies. For these reasons, I respectfully ask that the committee grant this bill a favorable report. Thank you.
I'm glad you're okay. Further questions from the committee? Senator Fulton.
Hey, Senator, I'll ask you. Can you come?
Senator.
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Yes.
So this bill, as it's written, would allow, just give the autonomy for them to lower these speed limits contrary to what's currently taught in driver's ed and state law. So there would have to be a whole new training associated with this because you're taught in driver's ed about residential zones, business districts, the speed limits associated therein in the event that they're not posted, that they're all automatically fallback speed limits. So this would change that because it would change it for rural areas, or I'm sorry, urban areas. But the rural areas as defined would still fall under the current law. So, I mean, so we just had the hearing on the speed cameras.
I was right.
So now we're going to have a separate part of the areas, and we're going to lower it contrary, which is what these are NHTSA recommendations also that are provided to the states. And we're going to look to lower that by 5 miles an hour without any study analysis, just give them the authority to do it. And thereby potentially, depending on where they change these speed limits, could add to revenues off some speed cameras because where people would, what they've been trained would only be going 7 miles an hour over. By this, it would make them 12 miles an hour over.
I believe the answer is yes. But what I will do is and I understand exactly, I mean, we come from the same world, but I understand exactly what you're saying. And it's about communication to the public and putting out the information from the Department of Transportation should the bill pass. In whatever version the committee deems fit. But we're all after the same thing. We have too many fatalities, too many serious injuries. I believe, and I would defer to my partners with Department of Transportation about their communication efforts in making those changes. Prince George's was the first on the previous bill, which Baltimore County is looking to become a part of. We were the first to put in the cameras on a state highway down on Route 210. And so it took a tremendous effort, a combination of the legislators here, the local officials, the community leaders, as well as Department of Transportation and State Highway to make sure that the community understood what those changes were. So I understand it, and it's great that you talk about the training in driver's ed. That's for another bill, obviously, because it's not consistent across the board.
I mean, the injuries that we're seeing, there may be, I don't know what your data says, but the injuries, the types of injuries we're seeing are being reduced because of improvements to vehicle safety, cabin design, the study of occupant kinematics, and of those inside the vehicles. So I appreciate you bringing the bill. I just have some concerns, but
that's okay. I mean, and the experts are here.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that they spoke that this bill speaks to the urban areas.
Yeah, I appreciate
the numbers they're saying.
Thank you.
So I'll defer.
Yep, nope, all correct there. In terms of urban areas, we know that more crashes happen in urban areas, and in our suburban activity centers, they're more severe. And so our activity centers, even though they're in what might be thought of as rural, right? We used to have this divide urban rural. We're categorizing it as a suburban activity center now. So there's still some density there. So those are the two areas, right? There are urban highways that would qualify located in suburban activity centers. Those are the two areas where we would focus on. Our motor vehicle administration, as well as the state highway administration, was at the table when we were discussing like what we could all agree on in terms of what's impactful and
they have
how we
letters
would
of
get the
support.
message out. Yeah, so our highway safety office is located under MVA, and they are responsible for updating the driver manual. They're currently working on that now to align with the strategic highway safety plan, which is also due for update later this year. So we have all the people that are on board with those training programs and the manuals at the table when we're talking about how to implement.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And just further to add to that, as I mentioned, I guess I need to go up here. We'll conclude this quickly. So, and when I mentioned earlier about the gentleman that I was associated with when I was doing leadership development for public safety across the state, Tom Gianni, Maryland Highway Safety Office, and their job was to make sure that all the agencies were informed, as well as their outreach to the schools and the other programs. So that's understand exactly what you're talking about. It's about communicating.
All right. Thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. With that, that'll end the hearing for Senate Bill 464. We'll now move on to Senator Hershey with Senate Bill 510. Sure, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Steve Hershey. How ironic I bring before you a bill that deals with electric energy policy after today.
I got a couple questions.
I bet you do. Hopefully I can answer some of them before. If not, we have a great panel that can address it. Just for some background information, co-ops are not-for-profit member-owned electric distribution organizations. And they are governed by an elected board of directors. In the case of Chop Tank Electric, which is here before me, they have 10 members, one from each of the 9 Eastern Shore counties and Ocean Pines as well. These differ very much from the for-profit investor-owned utilities such as BGE, Pepco, and Delmarva, which report to stockholders. So with respect to that, Senate Bill 510 is a very simple bill that defines non-escheat capital credits as essentially money due to any past members of a cooperative that has not been claimed in a 5-year period. And simply the bill then describes how these capital credits can be reinvested back into the community. And lastly, the bill removes non-escheat capital credits from the presumption of abandoned property. Essentially, that's what the bill does. My panel can explain exactly why this is beneficial to Chop Tank and its members as we move forward. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your attention and ask for a favorable committee report.
Excellent. We'll hear from the rest of the panel, then we'll take questions at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Valerie Conley here on behalf of Chop Tank Electric Cooperative. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs and Public Relations. And as the Senator explained to you, we are a membership organization and our first order of business is service to our members. And the main thing we do for them is deliver electricity. And we usually, we always work for what our members are asking us to do in the community besides doing electricity. One of the things many of you may have heard of recently is our effort to bring broadband internet to our members. And that's not something we would have taken up except for that we had a huge number of members that had no access to internet. And right before COVID, we were able to get permission from the General Assembly to move in to that activity. And that's been a very good service that we've been able to deliver. And so what we're before you today with is a bill that allows us to continue any investment that the members make into the co-op to continue to invest that to improve the community or improve the distribution network. Some of the things that we would do with any monies that let me back up one step. So when we distribute capital credits, it comes from, at the end of a year, we'll add up what it cost us to provide electric service to our members. If there's anything, if we've collected anything more in rates than what it costs to provide the service, we allocate that back out to our members. And then every year we pick a certain amount of money that we don't need to run the operation and we refund that to our members through a distribution. We find most of our members, but occasionally someone has moved out of the area and hasn't provided a forwarding address. We have folks who look for them. But from time to time, we can't find them. And that has, the presumption has been it's abandoned property, and we've sent that to the comptroller. But we believe we can use that very usefully at the co-op to help improve the distribution network and participate in the community at large. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Matt Tefel here on behalf of Chop Tank Electric Cooperative. You have some local support for this bill from a number of Chamber of Commerce. We've been in the community educating our members and other business communities about this legislation. So that should be in your packet. It also aligns Chop Tank and the other cooperatives in the state with how other 37 other states allocate these non-capital credits that keep them within the cooperative. I'm just going to end real quickly with an example. My parents and I grew up on Chop Tank lines for 30 some years. They moved to Georgia in 2012. Last year, Chop Tank retired credits from 2012 and reverted them to their members. My parents received a check down in Georgia for $89 and they were tickled. So we have a process in place, both electronically and paperly, for when members move or pass away, whatever that may be. We have a process in place to track them down. Actually, we have a dedicated staff person to do just that. So we know holding these unclaimed capital credits for 3 years, we have a process in place to try to track down those members as best as we can. And so with that, Mr. Chairman and members, I ask for a favorable report for SB 510. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Smith, Vice Chair Wallstreicher, and esteemed members of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Thank you, Senator Hershey, for bringing this bill. My name is Tiffany Harvey, and I'm a principal with Cornerstone Government Affairs. Along with my client, Chop Tank Electric Co-op, I'm here in support of Senate Bill 510. The impact of this bill is largely local, and we believe that non-escheat capital credits held by Chop Tank Electric should remain with the cooperative for the betterment of the communities for the reasons that have previously been mentioned by the panel. Thank you. We stand ready for questions.
Questions from the committee? Actually, I do have some legitimate questions, actually, for the sponsor, if you could stand up. And then if you all can chime in to help, because I should have your question. So again, you described your parents left 3 years, 3 years after the property went down to Georgia, got a check for $89. And that's why I was wondering why the demarcation at 5 years that they have to notice, like why 5 years?
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 5 years came from, we patterned this bill after the Delaware law that allows for the same process. And so
you're finding that like 5 years is the right amount of time for people that are just you can't find them for 5 years.
Right. So it gives a little bit of an extra time. Right now, after 3 years, if we retire capital credits and distribute them back to members, we wait 3 years. State law requires us to wait 3 years. And if we don't find that person at the end of 3 years, we send it to the comptroller. So this allows the extra 2 years to continue to look for anyone that we couldn't find, or allow them to make the claim back to us. And then we could use it for other things within the cooperative or for charitable contributions in the community. I would also point out that there is a provision in there that says if Matt's parents came 10 years from now and said, hey, I think you might owe us money, we have to refund that money to them at that point as well. So we'll never be in a place where someone says, yes, I got lost and forgot to give you my address, but I think you owe me some money. We would never be in a place where we'd say, no, you forfeited it by not giving us your address.
That was actually one of my questions, because there's a line that says nothing in this section may be construed to relieve a cooperative of the obligation to refund the non-sheet capital credits on application of a past member.
Right.
So that's the kind of escape valve for that.
Right. Yes.
And then are these procedures, I know the law will enable this, but these are procedures that are mainly determined by what type of entity or board? Is it the governing board of the cooperative, or?
Yes, it says if we are going to use the money, if we can't find the owner of the money and we're going to use it for the cooperative, the elected board of directors has to determine how the money can be used. And so we had some examples in the fact sheet that
packet.
we filed with you,
Yeah.
but there's a bunch of different things we could do, but the board would have to vote for how those monies are used in any particular year.
So the elected board decides how to do that.
Right.
You got it. And then obviously you've enumerated where they can go, what the money can be directed toward.
Right.
Got it. Do we have this bill? We had a anonymous sheet.
We introduced it last year at the very end, but it was a late file and I think it came over here and then we just decided there wasn't enough time to work on it. So we decided to wait until this year.
Got it. Understood. Okay. Thank you. This is the second time I think I've ever talked about non-achievement in JPR. So anyway. All right. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thanks. All right, that concludes the hearing for Senate Bill 510. We'll now move on to Senate Bill 486. I think Senator Hayes is here. Welcome.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of JPR. Senator Antonio Hayes for the record. I find it weird that I'm here on this bill, but I'll explain it as best as possible. It's more of a procurement bill more than anything else, so bear with me for a minute. So in our state procurement law, we have what you call preferred providers. There's 3 such preferred providers in the code. There is Maryland Works, which provide job opportunities and workforce development to individuals who have disabilities. Very noble position to be in. If we didn't have them as a preferred provider in our state procurement code, many of those individuals wouldn't have an opportunity for employment. The other would be blind industries. Blind industries create employment opportunities for individuals with visual impairments. The third is MCE, which is really, really weird, but understanding how MCE came about, once the 13th Amendment of the Constitution that banned slavery took place, the extension of that was kind of like these black codes, whereas individuals could get arrested on things just as small as looking at a white woman and could get 30 years in prison. And so these black codes was a way to help reinforce the workforce that was lost with slavery being abolished. And then somewhere around like the 60s or so, the federal government actually made it against the law to transport prison-made goods across state line due to the exploitation of those who were incarcerated. And so Maryland, just like many states, their response to this and, the old chain gangs and all of that stuff was, all right, the federal government's going to make it against the law. What we're going to do is mandate that it takes place interstate. And so most states, and then in order to create a market in state procurement, they're identified as a preferred provider. So these 3 organizations are the only ones that pretty much have a monopoly on the market, whereas you cannot purchase from any other entity but these 3 entities. Much of our furniture and stuff here in the General Assembly, at our colleges and universities, are all made by prison-made goods. They pretty much have a monopoly and a special designation in state procurement law, and we create a false market by forcing state agencies to purchase for them. For example, there's an individual small minority-owned business in Baltimore County, graduate of Morgan State University. He would have liked to do business with his alma mater at a discount. He's prohibited by state law because in our procurement law, you have to do business with MCE as long as they have the product. The bill before you today is simply to take a closer look. There's a management council that really has the authority to look at some of the practices of Maryland Correctional Enterprises. We're asking to expand kind of that authority. Most of the times, the products and goods and services that MCE are at a greater cost than what they are anywhere else in the marketplace. And so we want to look at, the cost of these products, amongst other things. And so that's essentially what this is. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Specifically, the bill requires evaluation of the number of private entities offering similar goods and services. Again, there's many Maryland businesses and other businesses that could offer the state at a better value. But because our procurement structure is the way it is, you have to purchase from MCE. We also want to examine the potential benefits associated with soliciting private entities versus soliciting with MCE. Maryland Correctional Enterprises play a very valuable role, right? They create opportunities for skills or whatever for individuals, but and I've recently had a chance to go there. But if you look closer into like some of the things that's going on there, I think there's an opportunity for them to be more competitive and look at how they could benefit the state of Maryland in a better way, especially being competitive with the private sector. Right now, the private sector does not have an opportunity to compete against prison-made labor. The average inmate is paid a wage of anywhere from 40 cents a day to $1.12 a day. The private sector can't really compete against that far as labor costs. And so I have 3 bills. This is one of 3. The other 2 was appropriately assigned to B&T. I'm not sure what lands me here in JPR, but that's what's taking me so long and kind of helping you understand like how we got to this place. But really, we want the management authority to expand its scope and look at what is the return of investment in doing business with MCE versus doing business with some of our Maryland local businesses here in the state of Maryland. And with that, Mr. Chair, I urge a favorable report for Senate Bill 486.
Thank you, Senator. We're going to take the virtual testimony, and then we'll circle back with questions. Mr. Grand Prix.
Good afternoon, Lawrence Grand Prix, Director of Research for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. This is a conversation we've been having in the community for a long time now. We support the study bill. We'd love to see a lot more. It seems like MCE makes quite a bit of money, over $50 million last fiscal year, which is odd considering they have the structural advantage of using unfree labor. We know they claim to be investing in programming, and what they do is programming. But if they're charging so close to market rate, why not just pay someone else market rate and invest whatever they're reinvesting in their profits to a diversity of programming behind the walls that isn't directly through MCE? It's important to remember that cost must go beyond economic impacts to fully capture the cost of MCE. The cost is a psychological impact of folks inside the jails being told they have to work for a small fraction of what they can make outside of the prison and being told that's core to their rehabilitation. It's the cost of limiting the freedom of Maryland institutions who want to be able to express their values by buying from other vendors but cannot do so in the current structure. It's the cost of limiting the competitiveness of other indigenous Maryland-based manufacturers or service providers who cannot compete against the structural advantage that MCE has. So I believe a study bill would give an analysis of this unfair structural advantage, making other ventures in Maryland non-competitive. And we can invest in those actual ventures outside of the prisons to do the services that we need, but also give people jobs outside the walls. People need jobs when they come home. They're being trained to do things in prison that they can't do outside of prison because MCE has a competitive advantage against any other person outside of the prisons doing that exact same job. So I think that this study bill would show that investing in Maryland communities will create a stronger tax base, and the study bill would build stronger analysis from advocates like us to be able to bring you different bills and advocacies about ways to improve conditions behind the wall and improve MCE. This isn't about just attacking MCE, it's about creating better conditions for all Marylanders. So we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Senator Muse has a question.
Thank you. Would part of that study include, I know that what the pay is, I know that people can work for 20 years there. They'll be paid almost nothing, and when they are out, they have absolutely nothing. Is part of this, would it be relevant for part of this study to include paying them a much better wage and holding it what needed for them in account until they're out? So when they're out, they have something. We're putting them out with $2 and a bus ride home. They've worked for 20 years in the same industry that won't hire them when they are out of jail. Would something like that be a part of this, or could be a part of this study?
Absolutely. So it absolutely could be a part of that. That's not included in the bill as written, but I would welcome that as a friendly amendment. Absolutely. I just, like I said, I recently had a chance to visit MCE, And I met 3 individuals and they love what they do. Every day they learn the skills that they make it. But between the 3 individuals, they had 100 years of 100 years combined and working at MCE. A lot of times you will hear the department say that this creates an opportunity for people coming back into society. But what I've learned anecdotally and what I continue to hear, to predict the workforce and to keep a steady workforce, a lot of the times the people who are given the opportunity to participate in these skills are people with life sentences or pretty long sentences. So from a labor like standpoint, it also puts folks put the private sector at a disadvantage because these people aren't going anywhere. They're going to be there for a very, very long time. From a humanity standpoint, the things that we think that they're learning in preparation to coming back in society, it's not likely that they will be joining us very soon. Also, I will say 2 other things. One, since the exception of MCE, the scope of different products that they produce have expanded greatly to poultry farms on the Eastern Shore, to other places, all around. In addition, and I'm not sure if you all had a chance, but I think 2 to 3 weeks ago, the Associated Press did a 2-year evaluation of prison labor in the United States. And some of the things that they found in that expose were pretty disturbing, in that a lot of the labor, especially the raw products that are being generated from prison-made labor, are making their way to these large corporate entities like General Mills and others who are profiting from this labor. And so definitely, I think looking at the wages as well might be a good addition. A couple of years ago, the Delegate Wilkins, who's now in the chair of the Legislative Black Caucus, mandated that MCE created an annual report. Some of the wage information is included in that report. And so we probably want to see, if we do add something around wages, is not duplicative of what's already required.
Well, I'd like to look at that, see that in general. I just think that the savings and what they're doing for these companies, they should not come out without even a month's rent to fall back on. And I'd like to explore that with you and look at making that a part of that.
Yes, sir.
Study. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator West and then Senator Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Substitute Chair. So as I read the bill, the only thing that struck me as odd is that Maryland Correctional Enterprises has not submitted any testimony, either pro or con. Do you know where they stand on this?
They probably support it. It's like, no, I have no idea on where they stand on the issue. I think, it's simply a study bill. The management authority is already charged with the responsibility of providing advice to MCE. And so I guess they see this as just, just another function of the management authority. I can't imagine to predict why they didn't support it. Okay. But I would love to have the support of this committee in moving this bill forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the face of it, I think it's an important step, probably long overdue, that we have more transparency into the processes of these inmates and how the MCE treats them. I know this is not the bill, but I recall a few years ago, it's come up in the discussion with Senator Muse and you, and it reminded me that these inmates could work for a lengthy amount of time producing materials and products for MCE and its vendors. And then when and if they are ever released, they then scrounge for jobs and usually can't find them. And are you aware whether or not MCE has made any efforts to prioritize the hiring of individuals that are released that have worked for them while in prison for a lengthy amount of time?
Yeah, in my recent visit, I met a young lady by the name, I think her name was Nancy, who was supposed to serve as kind of like a navigator to connect people with jobs. And they gave me, of course, everyone wants to put on their best face. And so they gave me some examples. The number of individuals that it sounds like is being connected to jobs are minimal. But to answer your question, short answer, yes, they are making strides towards trying to connect people to jobs opportunity. Is it enough? Is it, really addressing the amount of individuals that are gaining these skills? Maybe it is, because so many people that are there are serving such long sentences and not being released. The 6 to 10 that they described to me may be the amount of need that they're addressing. But they did share some like examples, no more than probably a dozen a year that are being connected to jobs each year, although the population is far greater than that.
Is it another bill, or could, if we are postured to pass this, could we add something in that will require that type of a report as well?
We'll welcome that suggestion.
Thank you.
Great. Good hearing. Thank you, Senator, for bringing the bill. Thank you to our witnesses. We appreciate it. That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 486. That completes our hearings for today. We are voting today. The plan is to vote at 3 o'clock sharp, so please stay close. We will see you shortly. Thank you, everyone.